Hello and welcome to Have You Heard, where we explore science in the news. Each episode, a group of us will discuss a piece of scientific news that's caught our attention and reveal the real story behind the dramatic headlines. For example,
have you heard you can eat your way to better cognitive health?
Have you heard altering the energy balance of our immune cells can reverse brain aging?
Have you heard early diabetes could be bad news for dementia later in life?
In this episode, we're discussing dementia, and we are joined by...
Hi, I'm Mike Daniels. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Edinburgh, and I research dementia. And my fun fact is that I have a twin sister, but we do not share a birthday.
Ooh. And hello, it's Katie again, here from the University of Manchester as a PhD researcher. And my fun fact is I have to sing the alphabet to remember where all the letters go.
Hello, I'm Luke Still, and I'm a researcher also at the University of Manchester. My fun fact this time is I have lost an entire day due to a rollerblading accident.
Extremely bad.
Why am I picturing like roller disco levels of like wearing like full like spandex?
Because that's how I live my life, Katie. That's
Okay, I was just checking.
But no, it's less cool than that somehow. Basically, I was on rollerblades and a friend of mine was on a bike, and we decided to have a race down the street. This was, I must have been, 13, 14 kind of age. I don't remember the entire day, but I am informed that this is what happened. We're having a race, and basically I tried to step up a curb, and instead my feet just hit the curb, and I just went face first into the ground.
Oh.
And so I was concussed, and I don't remember that entire day. The first thing I remember is I was in an ambulance, and I turned to my mum. I was a bit confused. I was like, oh, what day is it? And my mum really grumpily just went, you tell me, Luke. And I was very confused by this response. Turns out I'd asked that question about 100 times.
Oh, no.
Like every 10 seconds, I'd just turn to her and ask what day it was. And I obviously don't remember other than the last time. So she was really, really sick of the question by then.
I once, when I was similar age, actually, I got stung by a wasp and went into anaphylactic shock.
Oh, dear.
That did not go well. But I also woke up having forgotten quite a lot and had a tube. I was intubated. And so I couldn't say anything, but they were like, give you a pen and paper, like, he's awake. Oh, brilliant. What do you want to say? And
wow.
where I live, you're almost equidistant between two hospitals. There's like the nice hospital and the shit hospital. And honestly, genuinely, the first thing I wrote was, where am I? And they all went, you're in hospital. And I went like, obviously.
Shit hospital or good hospital? That's what I need to know.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I'm never going to make it. It was the shit hospital, actually, but then I can't really call
no.
it the shit hospital.
Oh, well, we're glad you're alive.
Yeah.
It's all worked out.
Memory is just crazy, though. It's something that it's just really hard to get your head around. And there's the whole like aspect of psychology to it, as well as your general like cognitive behavior. Like whenever I think about memory, I always think about Sherlock Holmes's Mind Palace.
Nice.
And I tend to memorize things through colors and things like that. To some people, that just seems like absolutely like insane. It blows my mind.
Hence why the song, you use the song to remember the
Yes.
letters. It's
So
the same
I use
principle.
all those kind of fun ways of doing it, but I am a bit ashamed about the alphabet.
Does everyone not do that though?
Like I know, like probably I start getting confused around F, and like in the lab, all our things tend to be either numbered or lettered, and so there's like shelf F, and so every time I'm like, okay, so that one's A, that one's B.
I think I still definitely do it. There's bits of the alphabet that you know, but like the LMNOP bit, the really quick bit in the song, I have to sing the song to get that bit. And I think the QRST
UV
bit is that bit all gets muddled. I think that's really normal.
Check us out, guys. Look at us go. We're nearly getting the whole alphabet.
We're really good
out
at the alphabet song. Though apparently, I'm not sure how true this is. I think my reference here is TikTok. Apparently, the alphabet song has changed for the youth.
My
That's
God.
less confusing.
Right. Somebody note down the date. This is when I became old. They changed the alphabet song.
Though only according to TikTok.
What is it now? WAP?
I have no idea.
Has
That's
anyone
my
ever
hip
said
young
that?
person reference.
An older way of saying that.
Oh,
But before we get into all of this memory stuff, I have to ask, how do you have a twin? Is it non-identical twins?
Yeah, either side of midnight. The really boring way, but yeah. So I was born about 4 minutes before midnight on the 16th of January, and my sister was born about 5 minutes after midnight on the 17th of January.
that's really cool.
That is pretty crazy.
Wow.
It always freaks me out as well when you think about someone that's born in Australia at a certain time, but it's actually a different day, and they will therefore be like classed as older.
That's the other way of getting the twins on different days, is to be mid-flight crossing the international date line. But it takes a lot more orchestration.
Yeah, I think my mum once flew from Australia back to the UK on New Year's Eve, and it was just like
Ooh.
constantly New Year.
She was just trying to get more free drinks.
Okay, so Mike, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what your research is, and how that links into our topic of this week, which is dementia?
Yeah, great. So I am a postdoc. So I did my PhD in the University of Manchester, which is where I originally met you guys. And my PhD was kind of related to your immune system, and some of what we did in that PhD was looking at your immune system in dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm a postdoc, so that's my first job out of my PhD. Working at the University of Edinburgh, and I work for an institute called the UK Dementia Research Institute. And this is basically a big centre, and they've got sites all over the UK. So there's one in Edinburgh, one in Cardiff, one in Cambridge, and 3 in London. And we are essentially just a big group of researchers who are really interested in understanding how dementia comes about, and not just how we can understand dementia to maybe find treatments, but also how we can better care for people that are living with dementia right now.
Nice.
It's really important work, because I think particularly as we've got an aging population, pretty much everyone knows someone who suffers with either Alzheimer's or dementia or some sort of neurodegenerative disease. And it is so debilitating that even if we can't cure it or prevent it, learning how to adequately care is really important.
So can I just ask a very fundamental question? So what is dementia? Because it gets brought up a lot without necessarily being defined. And also things like, how does Alzheimer's relate to dementia, and like what types are there?
Yeah, great. Really good question. And honestly, one that a lot of people that work on dementia and neurodegenerative disease, which again comes into that, I think need to maybe do a bit of a better job trying to get this out there and explain this, because it is a little complicated, the way that it's worked out. Essentially, dementia, the word dementia is not a disease. It's a group of symptoms, and those symptoms include, kind of most famously memory loss, but also loads of other things. So a cognitive impairment in terms of maybe not being able to find the right speech patterns, mood changes, people become very aggressive often.
Okay.
And these are all the symptoms that lead to dementia.
Right.
Now, dementia is caused by underlying diseases. And those diseases, the most common cause of dementia, which accounts for about 2/3 of cases of dementia, is Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
So Alzheimer's disease is a cause of dementia. Now, confusingly, this kind of makes a little bit of sense. It gets more complicated when you look at other causes of dementia. So the second most common cause of dementia is vascular dementia. And that sounds a little bit confusing, because you're like, well, how can vascular dementia cause dementia? And it's a little bit woolly. And to be perfectly honest, I think it's something that maybe the field need to try and work on the way that that's explained a little bit. But you get, and then you get others. You get dementia with Lewy bodies is another example of an underlying cause of the group of symptoms that are dementia. And what makes it even harder, and this is actually, I could wax lyrical about this, but it's really interesting, because Alzheimer's disease gets it's the most common, it gets a lot of the kind of press attention, a lot of the research attention.
The well-known kind of headline for this kind of thing,
Exactly. And we as scientists try and find treatments for Alzheimer's disease, but I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's around half of cases of Alzheimer's disease, over half of cases of people that live with Alzheimer's disease also have other types of disease. So they will also have vascular dementia, or they will also have dementia with Lewy bodies, which is another cause.
And is that something where they are distinctly separate, or is it thought that they stem from one another, or is it really just not known at this point?
It's a question that everyone's trying to ask. So Alzheimer's disease is characterized by two main things, plaques and tangles. Plaques are big buildups of stuff. And the important definition is that plaques are big buildups of stuff outside the cells. So in amongst the brain, but outside of your brain cells. Tangles are similar in that they're kind of like big chunks of stuff. They're inside your cells.
Okay.
That's Alzheimer's disease. Vascular dementia is quite similar to Alzheimer's disease, but those plaques, you get kind of them and similar things to them around your blood vessels in your brain. And it's associated with usually poorer blood flow. Whether that's kind of cause or effect, there's a lot of research on that, but that's what it's associated with.
Yep.
And dementia with Lewy bodies, which is the third most common, and there are others, but this is the kind of like the top three, I guess, is the thing that you get is called a Lewy body, named after a guy, obviously always named after a dude. And that is similar to a plaque, but made up of a different thing, basically.
Okay.
You can see why that's not something that's well known in the public, because they are very subtle differences.
Mm-hmm.
It basically comes down to a buildup of plaques, misfolded proteins, etc., just building up somewhere in the brain, and subtleties of which can sort of be lost when it goes more out to the general public.
Yeah, absolutely. And a massive part of dementia research is understanding how to detect it earlier, but for that exact reason. And they say, okay, look, like we have treatments that we know don't work for people that are showing the symptoms of dementia, because we trialed them, and dementia has an awful record. Less than 1% of drugs that have been made have been successful in trials.
Wow, that's terrible.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, and billions of pounds get sunk into these trials, and they fail. And so people are saying, okay, actually, maybe what we need is, maybe the drugs weren't the problem, but we need to target earlier. Mm-hmm. And in order to target earlier, obviously, you have to know who you need to target. And so that's why there's a whole massive field in understanding how to detect dementia earlier. But there's also people that are trying to work out, okay, maybe we can design drugs that will work, like because we can't just give up on people at that stage.
Oh no, definitely not.
But I think, as Katie mentioned earlier, with kind of a problem that we're addressing is that we have an aging population. Modern medicine is relatively young, and what we've been concentrating on as humanity in general has been dealing with the stuff that is killing people. So we've gone, oh no, lots of people die of such a disease, heart attacks are a big one, things like that.
Introduce antibiotics, better healthcare, the National Health Service, vaccines, and suddenly people live longer.
Yeah, so we dealt with all that, and it was kind of like what's killing people? Let's deal with it. And we've been very successful at it. Sorry, not taking credit personally. I mean, as a species, we've done really well. But it means that we're living a very long time, and we start to encounter this issue where problems arise that are very long term. So over a lifetime, you kind of get this problem. So if I've understood correctly, things like Alzheimer's, where you have this buildup of tangles in the brain, that's as a result of very long life. Is that right?
Not necessarily. So there's studies where you look at people who live long but don't have any cognitive, don't get dementia, and then you can kind of compare their brains basically. And so like it's not like it happens in everyone, and that some people it happens earlier than others. But what is the case is, in the people it happens to, it starts, you're in your midlife, kind of 30s, 40s is when like you're starting to pick it up. Whether that leads to actual full-blown dementia and how bad that dementia is still not understood. And this again why it's so hard to study, because it's the culmination of, well, for a start, your gene, like big thing right there when you're born, that's a thing. And then it's a culmination of all the things that you interact with in your life, whether you're living in a polluted area, do you start smoking, Do you have good cardiovascular fitness? What's your diet like? And all those things add up into a really, really complicated equation, and that those things can trigger disease, or they cannot.
And because it's this amalgamation of lots of different things, the idea of this sort of super silver bullet that will cure all is maybe not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that leads on quite well to the article that Mike's going to talk to us about.
Yeah, it does, actually.
Yeah, but what was your headline again?
So, yeah, my article I found in iNews, and the headline is "Drug that can reverse effects of aging on the brain shows promise as treatment for Alzheimer's."
Nice.
Anything that says reverses the effect of aging, I am one, going to click on that article, and two, going to be very
Skeptical,
not susceptible.
And what I quite like about this, and this is a classic, you have the big article and then the subheading. So the subheading of this article is "Anti-inflammatory drugs completely reversed aging on memory and navigational skills in older mice."
Okay.
And it's a really interesting study. So I came across this a little bit backwards in being a dementia researcher. I obviously keep a track of all the papers that come out. So from the paper side of things rather than from the article news headline side of things. And I actually heard about this before the paper came out, because I'm on an email list for a group called the Science Media Centre.
Mm-hmm.
And when a journal is about to publish a new article, they will contact the Science Media Centre so that the Science Media Centre then get comments on that paper before it gets published in the news.
Oh, cool.
Interesting. Get the scoop.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened, when you publish your paper, your journal says, okay, we're going to publish it next week. And until then it's under embargo, so you can't talk about it to anyone. While it's under embargo, the media companies get to see it and they get to write their news article about it, but they also get to speak to other scientists about it. They get to interview people. And so all of this happens under embargo, and the Science Media Centre coordinate these interviews, essentially.
Okay, that's really interesting, because obviously we're talking about science in the news, and how it actually works from behind the scenes is always really interesting to hear about.
And this sort of second opinion aspect of any news article, you want to hear a second opinion from someone who's relevant in the field. And we've previously talked about this. And that's a good indicator of a good news article in science.
Yeah.
But I've never really thought about the logistics of how that actually happens. It's nice to know that there's a nice, neat system which works.
But yeah, the embargo stuff is really interesting to hear about. I hadn't thought about the fact that you could let people know about it ahead of time,
so that they get the chance to read it and give a comment on it, which is really good. And the Science Media Centre do amazing work, because they are
that makes a lot of sense.
People that coordinate who the journalist might speak to. They say, look, like we've got someone that will speak to you. And the other good thing about the Science Media Centre is that everything they get, they publish. So you can go on their website for any paper that comes out, for any news article, and you can usually find a list of, we asked 10 people about this. Here are 10 comments from completely independent scientists in the field. And the journalist might only pick one. Obviously, you can't put all 10, but it's really cool because you can look at all of them if you want to. But quickly about the article and generally the study.
So what were they up to?
There was a big study published by a very, very famous group in Stanford in the USA, published in Nature, in a very prestigious journal, which doesn't always mean anything, but that's where it went. And what's particularly interesting about this is that the paper itself does not mention the word Alzheimer's or dementia once.
Oh, okay.
And let's go back to that headline of...
Shall we reread the headline?
Shows promise as treatment for Alzheimer's. Wow.
Not mentioned.
Okay. I do not like that.
So the paper is a test on how changing the energy balance of your immune cells. So every cell in your body has to generate and use energy, just like any machine would have to do. They do this with a bit inside the cell called the mitochondria. And what this group did is they looked at the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, as everyone always says. And they looked at whether this changed with age. And so that's really important. They did not look at whether it's changed in Alzheimer's or dementia. They look at whether it's changed in age. And if you look at the immune cells of young people versus old people, and young mice versus old mice, what you find is that there's an imbalance, and basically the old cells fail to produce energy in the kind of correct way.
Okay, so they take what, like old mice and young mice, and compare their cellular metabolic output,
and old humans and young humans, and they get immune cells from their blood. So again, this is the other thing that's quite interesting, is that the human stuff is they look at immune cells in the blood rather than maybe in the brain.
In the blood. So they've cell cultured patients. Okay. And what did they find?
Well, they found that in mice and humans, there's an impairment, basically, that they can't produce energy in the right way, and they believe that this is due to a particular inflammatory molecule called prostaglandin E2, PGE2, and its receptor called EP2. And they found that basically amounts of this stuff goes up when you get old, and if you block it with a specific drug, you can prevent that failure to make energy in the right way. So you can reverse that. And if you give that drug to mice, naturally mice, as they get older, they begin to have problems with their memory. And if you give that drug to mice, you prevent those problems with their memory.
Oh, wow.
And they also, and this is why this paper went into a very prestigious journal. They also showed that if you genetically get rid of the receptor, so with the drug or with genetic tools, you can do the same thing, basically. So it's pretty good evidence.
Okay, so that's sort of belt and braces approach.
It's
So
awesome.
that is really interesting. That's an
nice.
excellent piece of science that in itself is sensational. So why did they feel the need to include Alzheimer's and dementia?
And the funny thing about this is that in 2015, this group published a paper where they did a very similar thing in an Alzheimer's mouse model. So they actually have already looked at this in Alzheimer's, but what they have not done is look at it in the cognitive decline that you get over aging, healthy aging, essentially. And so if anything, the headline from this paper should be, it's separate to dementia.
Yeah, it's
changing your immune cell energy usage can reverse aging.
Yeah, so it's anti-aging, the normal decline that you'd see with age.
Yeah, which is still relevant because as we discussed earlier, there's a lot of overlap between the healthy version of aging and Alzheimer's aging. There is a lot of overlap. So it's still, if someone was to say, okay, and this is probably what happened, what disease is this relevant to? What are we talking? You would go, I guess, probably dementia, because that is pathological aging that leads to memory issues, and that's what they've done in this paper. And I also look back at the press release because I was wondering where dementia got in here, because the paper's not to do with it. And I wondered, so after these scientists before these scientists published this paper, they would have spoken to their press office at Stanford, and they will have written a press release that will have been sent out to the media outlets to inform them on how to write this news story. And the press release also does not mention dementia or Alzheimer's or neurodegenerative disease.
Okay.
And it's brilliant. The press release is really, really well written. Arguably better than a few of the articles I've seen, but it is also longer, to be fair. And so it's crept in somewhere between the press release and the news headlines. Yeah, maybe it gets you clicks, doesn't it?
But one of the things I did like about this article is its sort of subheadings showed the limitations. So, for example, the drug's not been used on humans yet. It could have toxic side effects. And what I really liked was this whole section dedicated to outside reaction, which is what we were talking about previously with the science media. So what had other people said about it? And it's largely positive, but they all say, we need more research needs to be gone into this. And it's a short article, but I reckon we would probably argue that some of the space should have been given to a more in detail description of what had actually happened, and that space could have been taken the place of all the stuff where it starts talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, which is just speculation, really. So I think I've only done this once before, but I reckon I'll give that a 6 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good article. But yeah, I think because of all the very understandable confusion between normal cognitive decline, dementia, and Alzheimer's, I think they've gone to try and make it more relevant, mentioned Alzheimer's when maybe it's not appropriate to bring that in to the equation.
I think so. I think that's my kind of, I think, and it's finding the balance between getting what we all find and is extremely exciting research, getting that out there and making it relevant. And I think I understand that, but I think at a fundamental level, I disagree with the dementia links that they make here.
Yeah.
I think you just, let this one go by outside your off stump. Like it's fine. Pick another one, talk about the aging, which is really interesting. But apart from that, I agree with you guys. I think it's a pretty small, pretty concise, but generally well written article with a quote from Professor Tara Sprice-Jones, who's also based at the University of Edinburgh and also at the UK Dementia Research Institute, like me, and does a lot of this sort of work and has a very balanced quote. A little bit coded. She talks about how this is in small groups of mice. Which is one that you don't normally see. It's a little bit like of a go at the numbers there, which I didn't think were too bad. But it's pretty good. But I wish they hadn't talked about dementia in this one.
So I think my article also commits a similar sin. So the article I brought along is titled Brain Health. Eat your way to better cognitive health to reduce your risk of dementia. So this was one that came up on my Facebook feed from the Daily Express very recently. So I thought, excellent, this is fully relevant to what we're talking about.
Your algorithm is working well.
Indeed, they have overheard me discussing dementia recently. But yeah, so this is about how you can change your diet to better improve your brain power, is the word that comes up a lot in the article. And it has a similar problem in that you've got that headline, and then just underneath the headline, your first paragraph, it's talking about how when you're talking about diet, people care about what it does to your body and less about what it does to your brain, which is a very reasonable thing to discuss. And then it kind of swiftly talks about how your brain health is important because you don't notice until it deteriorates, and then you have issues with dementia and things in later life. However, it asks the question whether you can eat your way to a better brain health. But after that first paragraph, it doesn't actually reference dementia again.
Oh, not again.
Yeah.
No.
And this is another headline where, so it's brain health, eat your way to a better cognitive health to reduce your risk of dementia. If you just had that, you could think, okay, well, there may be a study that shows that people that have been on this sort of diet compared to people that haven't have a reduced risk of dementia, or it could be like a population-wide study, or it could be what kind of media or what you feed your cells, and sees how the prognosis of dementia comes out from that. And I think in fact the case it's none of those things.
No, it's a little misleading. So it mentions dementia at the start, and then immediately what it starts discussing is terms such as, brain power, brain health, cognitive ability. So quickly sidesteps the dementia thing. And as we were saying, what you expect from your kind of brain power, as it were, is that it will decrease with age to some extent. But dementia is by definition more cognitive decline than you'd expect for a person's age. And so it's kind of playing on the idea that if you increase your brain power, you won't get dementia.
Well, yeah, funnily enough, increasing brain power is obviously a weird way of putting it. So there's a theory behind when people develop dementia and when they don't, and it's called the theory of cognitive reserve. And what the theory basically states is that as you get older, you will lose brain power essentially, and therefore the more brain power you have. So say you have 1,000 brain power, right?
Yep.
And if you get to 500, that's the point at which you will develop dementia,
as measured on the brainometer, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. So if you lose 100 brain power a year from when you're 65 and you were at 1,000, then by the time you are 70, you will have gone down to 500 brain power and you will be in a bit of trouble. However, if you have a higher cognitive reserve, i.e., if actually it's 65, because you, for example, the primary example is stayed in education for longer. So that's one of the kind of bigger ways of reducing risk of dementia is being in education for longer. Mm-hmm. Now you've got 10,000 brain power. And this basically means that you delay your onset, so you have less chance of getting dementia because you have a higher cognitive reserve. And that's how the theory works.
Okay.
And so in a way, this article is absolutely right. And the funny thing about this article is, like, I just kind of wish that a lot of the things it says are absolutely true, but they kind of said in a really weird way.
Yeah.
And for example, a little bit further down, and Luke will probably come on to this, it talks about improving your brain health. And note that one of the taglines for the article, it basically says, when nutrition is discussed, many focuses solely on our body rather than on our mind too. We recognize the impact of diet on diabetes, cancer, teeth, heart health, but we talk a lot less about how food affects our brains. And that's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it talks about risk factors. And then it says, stop smoking. Cigarette smokers have a higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease. So it's just made the mistake that it says that people keep making
of concentrating on the body,
exactly. And what's really frustrating about that is that smoking is one of the risk factors for developing dementia, irrespective of cardiovascular disease. So I'm like, swing and a miss. Like, they were so close.
It was so close.
You were nearly there.
It was all working really well, and then you're like, why did you say that?
The thing with this article is it's just basically a lot of like good ideas that don't necessarily seem to be backed up. They're just sort of assuming that they are backed up.
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes from this well-established dietitian and nutritionist. They say this person spent 30 years working in this field and believes like a key part of your brain health is based on your diet. And then further down, it just then gives a bunch of like good ideas for food that will help you have better brain power. And then just no evidence or no sort of discussion of how that works.
Surface level and general.
Yeah.
And also, just quickly, the expert they've asked is described as a dietitian and nutritionist, which I want to pick up on because people might be wondering what the difference is. So it's an important point, and I can't remember if we mentioned this in our About Food and Drink episode or not. But to call yourself a dietitian, you need to be qualified in that field. So you need to have an official qualification. I don't know if that's a degree necessarily. I think it is, but I'm not entirely sure. The term nutritionist isn't protected in any way. So I could call myself a nutritionist. And it doesn't necessarily mean that what the person is saying is incorrect, but it just means that they are not officially backed in any way.
It's not actually a powerful word.
Yeah. So to clarify, if someone calls themselves a registered nutritionist, that means they have been accredited by a body that sorts these kind of things out. But yeah, the term nutritionist itself is always something you should be a little bit skeptical of.
I think that's the wrong way around, as in, and not that I'm disputing you, Luke, but I mean, I think that has confused me for so long, because I feel like nutritionist sounds great and dietitian sounds made up. It does.
It does sound a bit made up. Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound like it should be
It's
the other
like
way
an
around.
astronomer and an astrologer, which I will forever have to get mixed up.
Oh, I always get those. No, so to my ears, it's as if the made-up one is cardiologist, but technically they're heartologists. Like, It just sounds that bit odd to the ears. But yeah, dietitian is the official one, or a registered nutritionist.
So to take a very sharp turn, my article is actually pretty brilliant. I'm really impressed with it. So it's from the New York Times, and it's entitled "Earlier Diabetes Onset Could Raise Dementia Risk." And this is something that I'd had no idea about, so I was really interested in this, as I know people who have diabetes. And basically the subheading is, the younger the age of diagnosis, the type 2 diabetes, the higher the risk that this person will get Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia years later.
Okay.
So it's two things that I'd never really put together. So it's really interesting. And then it goes on, the structure of the article is it sort of describes what type 2 diabetes is. It's a chronic progressive illness that happens later in life. It's not something you're born with, which is type 1.
Yep.
It says that we already know it's got implications with hearing loss, blindness, heart attacks, etc., etc.
Mhm.
But they've said now that this new study shows that diabetes may take a toll on the brain, and it has been successfully linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease and these other forms of dementia, and that this risk is much greater the earlier you are diagnosed, which is really interesting. And then it goes on to place this in modern context. It says this is particularly important new information because, one, we have an aging population, and two, we have more and more people being diagnosed with diabetes and a rising rate of obesity, particularly in the US. So it sort of comes at it from, this is what we found out, this is why it's important, and in terms of the health aspect, and this is why it's new. We didn't necessarily look at the brain effects of diabetes. So it sort of sets it all up.
Yep.
And then it goes into the detail of the study. So it says it links to the paper, which I'm always a big fan of.
Yes, we did not talk about this. I had no link to the paper in mind, which wound me up. God damn it.
It really, really winds me up.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying to hide something, and it just instantly makes me suspicious.
Yeah, I think so. Mine, I think, was referencing a couple of different papers about particular bits of nutrition and its effects, and didn't give enough information for me to actually find the papers, which,
it's all about that freedom of information.
I don't like that.
It's arguably more criminal to write a whole article about a single paper and then not provide. I mean, I honestly, I did check to see whether it was open access or not, which is a whole nother kettle of fish. But anyway, the paper in my article was not open access, so it could be that they decided there was no point in linking a paper that people can get access to. Anyway, I still would prefer that you whack a hyperlink at the end, just so someone can, if they happen to have a mate with a university login, that they can look at it.
They can get on it, exactly.
And another point for your article there, Katie, for sure.
Yes, definitely. I was a big fan of that. So yes, they link this study, and basically it's a tracking study. So it's a massive population of 10,000 people who were either in the range of 35 to 55 at the start of the study in the late 1980s. And they tracked them all the way up to 2019. And they tested them every 5 years. So they gave them clinical examinations every 5 years where they took blood to have a look at glucose levels, to see if they could detect diabetes. And then they also combined this with the British government databases to look at dementia. And all of this data, they then analysed it and showed that, so of all of this data, there was a follow-up period of average of 30 years. And in this, they found many cases of diabetes and of dementia And then by looking at these, they calculated that for each 5 years going backwards in time, if you were diagnosed with diabetes 5 years ago, there is a 25% increased risk of dementia.
Wow.
So if you were diagnosed with diabetes 10 years ago, that's then a 48% increased risk of dementia. So it's incremental in that way.
Okay.
Compared with a person who doesn't have diabetes. Say if you have a 70-year-old who's diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they have an 11% increased risk of dementia. But if that person was 65, it is a 53% increased risk in dementia. So basically, the younger you are, your percentage risk of getting dementia from being diagnosed with diabetes massively increases by a really significant amount.
Wow.
This isn't saying because you have diabetes, you will get dementia. There's this correlation, this link between the two across a big population-wide study.
Yeah, that's a really, like a 10,000
It's big.
person study. This is a really well-designed piece of science. I like it.
It really gets into the detail of the results, which is like I'm here for it. I love some stats.
Stats.
I would have loved a graph, but I think that was asking a bit too much. But then they go on to say what's important to notice is that this study is observational, and observational studies are still science. But what's key is because it's observational and they explicitly say that they could not prove that diabetes causes dementia.
Mm-hmm.
But they say, despite this, it's a long-running, large population study which was controlled over many factors that affect your risk for dementia, such as race, education, heart conditions, stroke, smoking, etc., that this is significant. So again, really big tick from me. And then it goes on to ask an independent researcher what they think, and they say this is exceptional data, and it's a really important milestone in the field.
That's really cool.
And then towards the end, wrapping it up all nicely, I'm again big fan of this paper, is they go, so why would diabetes be linked to dementia? And they just say we don't know, it's unknown why that would link. But what we're in a position at now is we can start speculating at those mechanisms. But type 2 diabetes can be managed, and its complications can massively be reduced by monitoring your blood sugar, exercise and diet. So it is possible that living with this routine could minimize your risk of dementia. So it's downplaying that sensationalization and panic of saying you still have some control here. It's not a necessary, this is going to happen to you, which I just thought that was a really nice positive end.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time articles can end on the world is going to end sort of panic point.
Yeah.
And it's giving an action point that is safe and reasonable and recommended by any medical professional. It's not giving an action point that is a bit dodge or like implying an action point. For example, eating too much bacon increases your risk of dementia, which is a headline that I've seen in the last couple of weeks. It's not been like, okay, don't eat any bacon and cut bacon out your diet or something like that. It's not implying anything like that. It's saying, look, like, as Katie says, let's take this back. Like, don't panic. Do what you're doing. Manage diabetes is the best way to do this. You should be managing diabetes as best as you can anyway.
It's giving you another reason.
I thought it was brilliant.
Control your blood sugars and things like that. Yeah,
exactly. And it's a really well written article. My one qualm with this paper would be to not putting this information in the context of the field within itself. So within the idea of the link between diabetes and dementia. But really, I think that's sort of like a next level science in the news advancement that sort of should probably happen.
But yeah, it's a really well written article. I would recommend people read it. It'll obviously be linked in the podcast, the details. But yeah, I think that's really nice.
There's a good article related very much to this one about the the environmental risk factors for dementia, and worth reading. It's all the stuff that you might expect in terms of smoking and cardiovascular health, eating well. So Mediterranean diet is beneficial in reducing your risk, amongst other things. And yeah, they all kind of link together. So we can probably link there's another article that goes into that in quite good detail on the Alzheimer's Research UK website.
Cool.
Yeah, so if you're interested in the various things that are associated with your health and the links to dementia, we'll include some links with the podcast for you to browse at your own leisure.
Absolutely.
So we've heard a lot about dementia over our ramblings, and I certainly feel like I understand much more about the field of dementia and neurodegenerative diseases. And I'd just like to thank Mike for sharing your expertise. It's been really brilliant.
Yeah.
So what can I say about my article? I was really happy with it, and I think that the headline of earlier diabetes onset could raise dementia risk is a fair statement, which I believe to be true.
For my article, I thought it was a good article. Big problem for me for the bringing up of the terms Alzheimer's, the terms dementia, where was not actually tested in the paper, and I think was added in for relevance for the reader.
So yeah, from mine, it seems that there's certainly some benefits to cognitive health with your diet, but that doesn't necessarily translate to reducing your risk for dementia.
So thank you for joining us for this podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Have You Heard have a number of projects exploring science in the news. For more information, visit haveyouhearduk.com. If you have any comments, questions, or a headline you'd like us to tackle, get in touch with us on Facebook or Twitter at haveyouhearduk, or email us at haveyouhearduk@gmail.com.
And have you heard early diabetes could be bad news for dementia? Oh, fuck.